You're with Julian on the Brown Note in Australia's rental crises, which has been all over the news, even though it is something that's been building for more than 10 years in Sydney in particularly. But as the waves of people with slightly more money move further and further out, it infects everywhere. To the point where the most recent scandal involving the rental crisis was somebody offering a few square meters of their garden for, I think, $180 a week. Bring your own tent, and they would negotiate with you for access to the toilet, which is, I think, completely legal. But symbolically, as to how we treat people in the richest nations on earth, it is astonishing that in the UK now we have people deciding whether to heat their home or live or eat. In the richest nations on earth, the amount of people working more than one job just to be able to pay rent. We've reshaped society for the worst, and it shows how badly we treat human beings in neoliberal economic environments where they just don't matter, where they exist as, the batteries from the Matrix. We were there once to work, and now we're there to pay other people's mortgages, essentially. And it's down to your life lottery whether your parents or you were lucky enough to have bought a house when it cost 3.5 times the average salary and saw it go up 5 or 6 times in value, and to an era where it's 15 times the average salary, where you can leverage that to outbid anyone else who is looking to buy a house. The house price is already too high, and you can get a army of investment properties under your belt and parasitically leech off of everyone else's working endeavours. And also the job lottery itself. The most, as we saw during the COVID crisis, the most important roles in our society are often the worst paid, often with the least security. Whether you're in the gig economy, whether you're in hospitality or retail, or a cleaner, or a nurse or a teacher, you don't get remuneration anywhere near like an investment banker does, or somebody that potentially offers less to society than they do. So the job lottery has come in as well. Now, this whole thing was not by accident, it was by design. I've made many pieces over the years on the housing situation and how it's reshaped Western societies. I think that's becoming more and more emblematic as China and the BRIC nations rise. That we in the West, who once had this unimpeachable consumerist culture where people could afford to spend an enormous amount on goods and therefore bring up all these other countries by making them for us, we now don't have that disposable income because no one can afford to live. Apart from the people that did well in previous generations. This is all borne out in this country under John Howard. John Howard did Thatcherite damage to Australia, which we will possibly never shake off. The most evil impact politician in Australian history. And the 3 main tenets were tax breaks for superannuation and the wealthy, franking credits, and negative gearing on investment properties you own, which over the course of since like the early 2000s, when those all really kicked in the most egregious ways, have given people that already had properties an investment that has gone up dramatically in advance of anybody's wages going up, putting them ever more unaffordable to people that didn't already have a house, and 2, it's given you a lot more money to spend on new investment properties, to the extent where the renter is now captive to a mosquito-like parasite that simply takes all of their money. And we will never get on the property ladder, even though I've spent in... There's a spider descending from the ceiling. Luckily it was a small one. Australia. Even though I've spent $500,000 in rent in Sydney in probably 19 years, I've never ever come close to qualifying for a property that I would have already been now paid off, which is it's a mind-blowing paradigm. But if I had another property that was now worth $2 million because I bought it for $180,000 20 years ago, I've got all the access I want to outbidding everyone else that is currently a renter. And I saw on my own street, the the couples that won the auction, the young couples of battlers out there, they were the ones with their dad with them every time, who was obviously putting up the money. So we've got these three harbingers of doom that John Howard brought in, but now we're seeing a new paradigm, which is that they've struggled over and over to keep interest rates as low as possible. The Reserve Bank of Australia is having that right removed from them. I said over and over again, you watch, as soon as Labor come in, they'll do everything they should have done 5 years ago under the Liberals. But it seemed like the Reserve Bank and everyone involved was keen to keep house prices as artificially high as possible. So they did enormous damage to the economy. And then when the Liberals were on their way out, they started raising interest rates. And there is a debate as to whether doing so is actually a good thing or has the desired impact. But what has happened is that there are so many more people with investment properties now. Even when the economy is doing worse, rents go up because they own investment properties where the interest rates have risen. So they then pass that extra debt on to the renter. So even though their own value is falling, they make up the difference by increasing rent in an economy that isn't doing as well. And this is a paradigm of our entire economy, because the rest of our economy is built on disposable income, and we're taking that away from an increasingly large proportion of the population who will do anything they can to just be able to afford to live. The baseline for being able to afford to live in Sydney has gone from having an average to low paid job and one day owning your own 3-bedroom home to not being able to afford to rent a 1-bedroom flat if you're a manager in an office. And that is not even joking. The baseline now to live in Sydney is so ridiculous. And it's a paradigm shift. The number one reason to go to work was to keep your wealth. And the number one way to keep your wealth was paying off a mortgage on a loan on your own home. I've paid off $500,000 of other people's mortgages and don't have one red cent from that. This is a paradigm shift. The number one reason to work was to keep your own wealth. And when you died, you pass that on to your children in the shape of your home. Now, all we do is pass on all our wealth to somebody else's children. This should be rioting in the street stuff. It's been this slow tick, and it's just gradually sucked us dry until we're now in this situation. And it's probably the same in London, and it's probably the same in large parts of America, anywhere under the neoliberal bandwagon, where the right to live, we need to earn enough money to have the right to live, to have accommodation. We made the property developer and the property investor king in this country, and they did it in London as well. And now no one who isn't already benefiting can ever get on board that ladder. We have created the widest gulf in income inequality, I think, in Australian history. And this is people's entire lives we're talking about. Their happiness, their lives, and what they can offer their children, because they've spent their whole life renting in increasingly harsher situations. So there's only a one way out of this, and this is to really hurt the people that have benefited. You did it, I don't care. You did so well out of all of this, and the rest of us have suffered. You need to suffer. They need to pull the plug on negative gearing, franking credits, and these ridiculous superannuation tax breaks that artificially rig the system in the favour of one group. It will hurt them immensely as they have oversubscribed to loans that they cannot afford. They did so when times were better and interest rates were lower, and now they're struggling. We need to make it punitive to own more than one dwelling that you're not living in. Why is that okay? Why do we defend a tiny fraction of the population that own multiple properties above anyone else? Bill Shorten lost an election because he actually went after these people, even though they were a fraction of the population. The right-wing news media in this country has made these people, working class people, go into bat for them and to defend their rights and to defend these poor pensioners who are losing their franking credits and, you know, the death tax and all of this stuff that they took straight out of the neoconservative playbook in America. We need to hurt them. And someone's got to stand up and do so. And it's clear that Anthony Albanese is not the guy to do so, but it may happen in drips with him. We've seen some very tentative pushes backwards. But what's happening when they push back a tiny bit, the steep angle that house prices increase mean that every single day they're getting further and further away from the average person ever being able to afford it on an average wage. It's not benefiting society or the country as a whole. It's benefiting an entire group of people. No one ever says this. The number one people who benefit from house prices increasing are banks. Imagine you're a bank and you've got $100 billion out in loans. And then 20 years later, you've got 20 times that out in loans. Who do you think is benefiting from this? There's a lot of people out there that think they're worth several $1 million, but what they've got is several $1 million worth of debt. And then they're getting 5 or 6 other people to pay it for them. It's not benefiting anyone. And even if it's benefiting a few people that have to do virtually no work, sod them. And the thing is that's really grating is they say they worked hard to get where they are. Even if you did work really hard, it didn't get you where you are most likely. What got you where you are is you bought a house when things were fair that has dramatically increased in value through no fault of your own. And you may have also worked really hard anyway, but people like nurses are working really hard now and are locked out of the system. Are you really saying that you deserve more than they do? And people in certain high-paid office jobs are earning a fortune and can actually step onto the ladder. Are you saying that you're working harder than the average cleaner? No, you're not. You just feel entitled and you don't want to feel guilty. So we have to stop this incredibly unfair reshaping of society. And it is probably too late because for house prices to come back to normal will take 20 years. And the banks don't want to lose a cent of all the money that they've got out there, but we needed to have crash after crash to bring this down. And I can't see how it will ever happen. So sorry for the negative end and not offering a solution, but my solution is remove everything making it favourable to own multiple investment properties today and stuff them and let's weather that storm.